Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to another installment of our webinar series, really focusing on our ESTeem Software Suite, which is basically a group of utilities that we've done some overviews, and now we're going through each of these utilities individually to give quite a bit more of insight and a little bit more hands-on experience on how these things work. To kind of give you an idea, really where this all came about and really the purpose for it. We'll kind of take a quick look in, some of the major markets that we're involved with. We're really heavily involved with water, wastewater, oil and gas, do a lot of mining and dredging applications, material handling, overhead cranes. We get into a lot of ag type of applications, airport runway lighting, power and energy, kind of the whole heavy industry side of things. Now within this, one of the real workhorses of the ESTeem product line is the Edge 900. And this basically is a 900 megahertz radio, which is an unlicensed frequency that really runs in the heart of these different industries. And so really what we want to look at is how do we get into this radio? How do we do the configuration for this? So really what we did is we came up with a whole software suite of utilities that really the whole idea is to give you, the user, the ability to get in and do the configuration. We want to give you some monitoring ability. We want to give you tools to do some troubleshooting with this. And so it's really a whole host of utilities that are nested together, but they can all be run individually. Now, these utilities or the software suite is available up on our website for download for free. If you just go into our resource center and then under the ESTeem utilities, it'll take you to the page and you'll see the big blue arrow there to download that utility. And so what we want to do is to be able to get this into your hands to have a lot of use. And so as we kind of move forward today, really what we're looking at itself is the Edge 900 configuration utility. Now, really what this is designed to do is to give us the ability to get in and actually just do that, configure the Edge 900. This is where we can set, the modes of operation, whether it's a master or a client. We can get in and fine tune the serial communication settings if you're running serial communications. We can set an IP access list. We can get in and basically restrict some of that traffic and set up static ARP configurations and tooling. We can update firmware right from this utility. We can run a spectrum analyzer so you know which channel to choose for your operation. But we also want to give you some diagnostics. So we want to be able to show or display to you or at least deliver what that RSSI or the signal strength value is. And that's done through the Discovery utility that works in unison with the Edge 900 as well. And then just real basic ping testing is done how to verify that you've got communications across this. So really what we want to kind of look at from here is really kind of how does this actually work? And so I've got Eric Marsky, longtime ESTeem guru, and he's going to walk us through exactly how all this stuff works. Eric?
All right, thanks, Dan. Let me go ahead and share my screen here really quickly. All right. Now, everybody can kind of see. Let me move Dan over here a little bit. There we go. What I want to do is, as we've covered in a lot of this software suite utilities, is a lot of them really start with this basic first utility, which is the ESTeem Discover utility. Now, what the primary means that the ESTeem Discover utility will allow us to do is adjust the IP address of the radios from their factory default so that we can match them to the IP subnet of the computer or network that we're putting them into so that we can continue on with this configuration. So the Discovery Gate has many different features and functions to it, but that's what we're going to use it for in the with the Edge 900. So if I come down here and press the button that says Discover, what you'll see on here is I actually have two different Edge 900 radios, which is shown here at the very end. It'll give them by their serial number, MAC address, IP, all the primary parameters that are necessary to actually adjust them to fit into the network. So let's go ahead and we can simply get into the configuration utility in one of two different ways. You can actually go directly to it through the software suite. You can go to the Edge configuration utility and select it. The only downfall to that is that you'd have to know specifically what the IP address is, enter the IP address, and then link it to the radio. We can actually take a shortcut from the Discovery if you have an Edge 900 radio, if you do a right mouse click and hit configure radio, what this will do is this will open up the Edge 900. It'll give us the serial number so that we know that we're talking to it. And down here at the bottom, it'll say finished getting configuration so that we know that the configuration utility has linked to this specific radio that ends in a 134. Now, as Dan was saying, compared to a lot of our other more sophisticated network, the Edge 900 is kind of the workhorse. So it really only has two modes of operation. And those modes of operation can actually be set within the radio on the very first tab. It's either going to be a master site or it's going to be a client side. The other two modes of operation, which is the spectrum analyzer and the alignment, those are primarily done for troubleshooting and diagnostics. And we'll show you what each of those looks like. But we don't want to change that from the configuration at the very beginning anyways. But it's kind of an overview on the parameters that you can set within this first page. You can set the mode of operation, you can set the channel, which all radios in the network need to be on the same frequency channel. Now, really one of the most powerful features of this radio is that if you're really unsure as to what frequency channel that you need to set these radios to, you actually can go in there and um, use the spectrum analyzer, turn it on. It will tell you what that radio is seeing as far as activity in the 900 megahertz spectrum. And you can select the open area or the open channel within there to find that. And we'll show you what that looks like. It's just I don't want to do that from the beginning. The next thing is we actually, all the radios within the same network need to have the same network ID. So you could actually have two radio systems on the same frequency that have unique IDs that do not talk to each other. So those are the key parameters. It needs to be on the same frequency channel and the same network ID to be able to talk. Outside of that, we have the ability to actually encrypt the data going across the network up to AES 256. Now, as you see here, we've simplified this instead of a large passphrase that need to be entered in there. We can actually go in and enter in the passphrase instead of the keys, and it will generate the encryption key for us. We just need to make sure that both ends or all the radios in the same network have the same passphrase. So as you see here, by default, it'll be hidden, but you can actually do that for both the login password or the passphrase. Use the little show button. If you are going to be programming multiple radios in the network, you also have the button up here that says remember password. And what that'll do is that'll allow you to copy and paste your login password from one radio to the next so that they all are very much the same. Now, one thing that is kind of unique about this radio is the fact that the actual throughput on the radio is about 1 megabit per second. So if we're putting this into a very busy Ethernet network, we need to have the ability to actually start modifying or limiting the amount of traffic that go across that. So we've added in a few extra tools down here on this basic configuration page that allow us to do it. The first one is we have the ability to set what's called an ARP proxy. Now, an ARP proxy, what that does is that every time that the radio sees traffic for a specific remote and it has this address resolution protocol tag attached to it, if we've already talked to it and know how to get to there, we've entered that into our proxy list and therefore we can reply to it locally. We don't have to send that packet across to the opposite side for it to get there. It'll eliminate a lot of the RF traffic that goes across the network. Same thing for the TCP/IP keep alives. By default, we actually limit the multicast packets. You can actually turn those. So if you are doing multicast traffic, we can turn that on. Same thing for NetBIOS or IP6. As you see here, we basically restrict those from the very beginning, just so that we can limit how much traffic goes across this network. Now, once we've set everything in this main configuration page, we can move on to the next tab, which is the serial configuration. As Dan mentioned to you, we have the ability within this radio to set it up into many different types of modes. The first one is that you go in, if you're setting it as a serial link, we can enable the serial interface, set the data rate, parity, data bits, and stop bit. But you can also tell in there what specific locations you want that serial traffic to go to. Do you want it to only go to specific IP addresses, specific remote locations? So you could have within this network different radios communicating serially independent of each other. If you want them to all communicate, then with to one common network, we can actually. That's why the 224001, which is the global broadcast, is the default. So by default, we'll send it to everybody. You can actually restrict that traffic from there. Same thing if we go to the IP address list. This is something similar to that on the IP level. It's much in the way that you would configure a router, although the radio itself is not doing any specific routing. What it does is you can tell the radio to only send specific traffic to a remote radio. Again, a further way of limiting how much traffic goes across the RF network, because if you're putting this into a very congested network, we have to have the means of controlling it. In addition to the IP address list, we can actually set the specific ARP tables. So if we know what devices are physically connected to a remote location, we can put that into our static ARP table, and therefore those ARP requests no longer need to be sent across the network. Matter of fact, we don't even need to proxy them because we know specifically where they're at. Now, under the advanced tab of the configuration, we can really dive deep into the operating parameters of that radio. Now, a lot of this parameters you will never need to make an adjustments for. Most networks, you aren't only the only time you're really going to need to get in here and make adjustments to it is if support asks you to do so, or you get in and there are things in here for the carrier sense. In other words, how low of a signal it is before we recognize it as a packet. If you're finding you need a few more retries, we can adjust that in here. Most of these parameters will never be adjusted from the default, but we have it available within this configuration tool. The last tab, which is the Tools tab, this allows us to get into the radio and do some of that uh, save and loading of the configuration files. So if you do bring into a spare into a network, you don't need to remember specifically how it was configured. You can open a saved file, saved that configuration file to that spare radio, and then replace it at that location. It's just that simple. Okay, and you can do that through the save and load buttons here. You also have the ability to update the firmware in individual radio by simply pushing the update button. It's going to ask you where the file is located. It will update the radio, reboot it, and keep all the configuration file or keep all the configuration information that it had before. It's a very simple process in getting to do this. You also can get in there and reboot the radio. Now, the reboot side of this, really, you can, if the radio is actually located at a remote installation, to where it's pole mounted, to where it may be, it may be 50 feet in the air. This gives you the ability to, instead of having to push the reboot or pull the power to it, we can actually do this within software. Now, one of the,
So Eric,
yes, sir.
so a quick question for you that popped up. What's the difference there between where it says save as well as write configuration down lower? How do I save what we've done to the radio, or what's the difference?
Oh, that's a great question. Everything that we're doing as far as the configuration parameters within this radio is setting a static change to that radio. Where, in other words, what we're doing is coming up with a list of program parameters. To actively push that to the radio, then you can actually write the configuration or read the configuration. This is to the connected radio.
Okay.
These tools, when we're talking about the save and the load, these are saved configuration files that are going to be saved within the PC itself. So
Okay, gotcha.
that is a very good point, is that once we've actually done all the configuration or parameter change to the radio, you want to make sure that you write that configuration to the radio. It'll come up at the bottom, write configuration is done. Make sure you don't power off the radio during that point, and then verify the parameters of it by simply reading that configuration. And it should be what it is listed as. Okay. Now,
Great.
one thing that you did mention early on was that as you notice here, there are really no specific tools for testing how well the radio link is operating. Well, what we've tried to do is simplify this as much as we can. We've put a lot of that information actually on a tool that you'll be utilizing quite often, which is the Discovery. So if I put that up here at the top, I'll clear the list, hit the Discover once again, we'll see on here that the received signal strength for that remote radio is actually listed within the Discovery. So if you've got 5 different remote radios, each of their signal strengths will be listed there. The only one that isn't listed is going to be actually the master site itself. But every network can only have one master. Every other radio outside of that will be a remote. So the signal strength is going to be the same coming and going from that master site. Now, the one thing that I did want to show you real quick is what the spectrum analyzer looks like. It's just one thing to be very cautious about. You just have to be very aware of where you're at within this network, because as you see here, I have the ability within this radio to configure both the master radio, which I'm tied to, and also the client. If I make changes to the client and turn it into a spectrum analyzer, then it is no longer going to be a client during that period of time, and I'll no longer have access to it. I'll have to actually physically connect to it. So it's just something to be aware of where you're at within the network. So where I'm at is I'm at the master side. I'm physically connected to this radio. I can go in here, change to the analyzer mode, write that configuration. Now, once I've done that, I can actually go over here to the tools, and you'll see on here that our spectrum analyzer button is now lit up. If I hit the spectrum analyzer, what it will do, it will actually open up the spectrum analyzer page. And then what we can do is do what's called an enable the sweep. So what this will do is this will actually monitor all the activity in the 900 megahertz band. An easy parameter to set is if you go in here and push the button that says peak hold, what this will do is this will hold the highest amount of energy that happens on any one of the given sweeps. So over time, one of these channels will start to populate. As you can see here, we're starting to get activity in channel 2, channel 9, channel 12, and in an area that has a frequency hopper, some of these will come up. You're looking for the most isolated channel. So if we were to take this very short sweep, you can run this for as long as you need to. In this very short sweep, we'd say that we want to run channel 13, channel 4, channel 3. That's really kind of the purpose behind the spectrum analyzer. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and disable this, turn this off, turn this back, because at this time, the radio itself is no longer a master radio. It is actually just an analyzer. I'm going to put it back as the master. Make sure I'm on the correct channel. Write the configuration. Clear this. Write it. Okay. All right. So now it's going to be back to the master site. So all the parameters that we went through, was there any questions, Dan? I think did we cover all the sections to it?
No, I think you did a good job. Like I say, it's sometimes the simplicity is the beautiful part of this thing is that there's really not a whole lot to set. It's deciding which is the mode of operation for that radio, a network ID, and the encryption, and you're off and running. Is really kind of the basics of it.
Perfect. All
And
right.
but no, that was all the questions that were here.
Great. All right. So that's great. I thank for everybody's attention today and have a great day.
Thank you.